All right, welcome everybody. This is Genesis chapter 4. Now, usually the way I set this up is a day or two before, I'll read through slowly and take notes. And, and then I don't always understand my notes, so I reread it. But I found it's best to just jump back in, because if you read it ahead of time and you take notes, it's kind of there, and then I like to go in fresh right into it. Probably doesn't make for as good a video, but it makes for a much more interesting time for me. I'm all about me, I guess. All right, so chapter 4 is the story of Cain and Abel, Genesis 4. I'm going to do, well, let's just start here with the King James Version. Verse 1. And Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again, this is verse 2 now, and she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. I'll go on verse 3 real quick here. And in process of time it came to pass. No, I'm going to wait there. So I'm going to do the first two verses. So, first off, I have to say how funny it is the way the Old Testament, the entire Bible, mentions sex. So, it's just funny to me. Adam and knew Eve. I just love the subtlety to it, you know? I always find that interesting. When parents ask, how do I answer my child's question on these issues? This is always kind of how my parents handled it. Like, you don't have to give detail, we understand what he's saying there, what's being talked about, and it's subtly and it's respectfully and it's funny. I just find it so funny. And Adam knew Eve, wink. And she conceived and bare Cain. All right, so, and this happens throughout the Bible, so it's just funny. Now, many think Cain and Abel were twins. There's also other legends or stories or Hebrew lore where each one had a twin sister and they married each other's sisters. I'm not sure. I mean, there's other references, but it's non-canonical stuff, so we can't be sure. I mean, it doesn't make it clear here. It just says, Cain, verse 2, and she again bare his brother Abel. So, it doesn't sound like twins to me, but who knows. But the way that verse 1 ends, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And then verse 2, and she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep. Now let's go down here. I want to look at the translation of Abel real quick, like a feeder. Okay. And Cain is, that is living. Huh. That's interesting. So a lot of people, like I've mentioned in the other ones, there's theories. And again, I will go over all the theories. You don't have to believe all these. Believe in Christ. Believe in the message. And all this other stuff is just side noise to talk about. But one of the theories is that Cain was, Eve was beguiled, and he is the son of the serpent, the seed of the serpent. It's a whole different breed. I don't buy into that. I think it makes it too easy for us to explain sin away or evil, that it's a whole other breed. I think the seed of the serpent are those who decide and willingly live in sin. But it's still an interesting topic, and I would never like, oh, if you believe that Cain is the seed of the serpent, literally, then you're misreading it. No, I mean, it's not important, otherwise Christ would have addressed it. So it's just interesting conversation stuff. But that one right there, a man from the Lord, and different translations make the argument that she's saying a man of like an angel or a demigod. I'm not going to get into it because I don't know all the translations, but just the way it's worded, sometimes people translate that to say that Cain was not of Adam. And again, I don't buy into it. But anyway, so Abel becomes a sheep herder, which I don't get. Okay, how or why are they herding sheep if most everyone agrees that the Old Testament, up until Noah, they were vegetarians? So, what are the sheep for? I mean, and the fat thereof, it says, for the sacrifices. So, were they using the fat for, obviously fat has many uses outside of eating it. Were they just using the wool? Who taught them about sheep wool? I just find it interesting that they are herding sheep, but yet they're not meat eaters, apparently. Anyway, so blah blah blah. Let's move on to verse 3. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And then verse 4, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. Okay, I have to stop right there. So the brothers both bring an offering, but God only respected Abel's. Now remember, Abel's bringing the flock, and Cain is bringing his crops. Now we have to understand that there's many things that were implied to already be known to the Hebrews when Genesis was being written. I mean, it's most people agree that Genesis is written by Moses or some people of that time. So a lot of these things are just, it's already, Cain and Abel's known, so they're not going to get into it. And there's other books that are referenced later in the Bible, like Jasher and even Jubilee, I think, where they talk about this in more detail. And it's pretty obvious what the real story is, that Abel was bringing his best. He was bringing his best for the offering, whereas Cain was just bringing, I mean, who knows, maybe it wasn't his worst, but it wasn't the best of his crop. So God doesn't even look like mad or curse or anything at Cain. He's like, okay, thanks for the offering. But Abel gave him his best, so he looks at respect for that. Think about like a present that you give for Christmas or something. The one with more thought and time put into it, not always more money, but more effort, is going to be looked at with more respect than the people who don't put any effort into their gift at all, or just get something cheap and pointless. It's you're giving your best effort. A good one is a coach. So someone who's coaching a team, it shows a lot of respect. Talent doesn't always matter if you're a good coach. It's going to be a lot more based on the effort that they're putting out. It will determine how much respect you have for them. And that's what's going on here. Cain was jealous, becomes jealous, we'll get into it, of the respect that God is giving Abel. God's not cursing Cain. God's not keeping a blessing from Cain, anything like that. He's just simply showing respect to Abel's offering because Abel is giving his best effort. Something to remember. If we don't understand that, then we're not going to get the point of the story. We're not going to get the moral that it's trying to teach us. So you need to know that Cain's offering is not his best offering. So duh, of course, he doesn't get the respect. All right. Yeah, God didn't even reject his offering. It was nothing silly. It was just basically like that. And Cain gets angry. So this is kind of the same story. The more you study the Old Testament, that happens with Jacob and Esau. And I believe it also happens with Isaac and Ishmael. I know it happens with Isaac and Ishmael, and I'll get into that when we get to it. But they're both giving offerings, and one's not giving his best. He's just kind of, I think Esau, he was a hunter, and he was just like, whatever, my leftovers, and this is what he gets, and the things that I don't want. So, of course, God's like, I'm going to give Jacob the blessing here. But that's way down the line. Okay, so moving on, verse 5 here. I gotta get going. Sorry, guys, I just get to talking. And gals. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. So that's verse 5. Going on to verse 6 here. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thou countenance fallen? If you doest well, thou shalt not be accepted, and if thou does not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but I'm going to go back and read it in the New International Version. There's a few things different that make it easier to translate. For instance, instead of saying respect, the King James Version, God didn't show respect to Cain's offering. It says he did not look upon it on favor. But let's just do 6 and 7 here in the New International Version to make it a little bit easier for us to get into. Then the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. this is why is the scriptural evidence that I use against the debates for Cain being the seed of the serpent, literally. And again, I don't want to offend anyone who believes that it's not important. If you believe that and you still believe in Christ and your Creator, we can have these difference of opinions and still live in faith together. It's not important, but think about that. Let's just do verse 7 one more time. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. Living in sin is the seed of the serpent. You see, if you do not do what is right, sin approaches, and it is waiting at the door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it. This door reference is used again later, of course, by Christ, but we'll get into that in the New Testament way down the line. But he's talking about how he's at the door. He will always answer. Anyway, sin's going to rule over you if you do not do what is right. One more time. If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted, and if thou does not well, sin lieth at the door, and unto thee shall be his desire. So he'll only do what your heart's desire. You won't do what is right. You won't do what is well. You won't follow God's teachings. You'll do what you desire, and you will live in sin. And then you will be the seed of the serpent. Okay? It's something that any of us can do. That's why I don't want to get so far ahead of myself, but when they talk about, I'll get into it in Genesis 6, there were giants in that time, and then after the time of Noah, they were as well. And people are like, oh, these bloodlines. And I do fall into the Genesis 6 conspiracy that I think that it's talking about angels coming down. But I think that we can all become the seed of the serpent. It's not a bloodline thing. It's living in sin. Choosing to live in sin makes you the seed of the serpent. And it's saying that right here in chapter 4, verse 7. So let's move on, though. I'm just sticking on this one. It's just funny to me how God encourages Cain here. We know what Cain ends up doing. He's going to kill his brother. Spoiler alert. He kills Abel. He kills him out of jealousy. And it's so ridiculous. He's just that guy on your team who's a D-bag. He really is. Because here he is hey, man, if you do well, of course I'm going to show you respect. The reason I'm not showing it to you right now, the reason I'm not looking on favor is because you're not doing what's right. You're not giving me your best effort. Instead of being yeah, he's right. I need to step it up. God's not cursing him. He's not even chewing him out. He's being encouraging. And Cain's just a D-bag. That's what it is. Cain's just a D-bag. He's a tool, all right? And he just cares about himself and his own personal desires right here. Sin desires you. Sin will be your holy thing. And that's him, because he's all about himself. All right, so let's go on. Verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. What? I'm sorry if kids are watching this or anything, and parents have to answer what this is, but that is just... There's no other word to describe it to me than a bunch of curse words. I don't know what to say. Dude's just a jerk. Jerk's too lame of a word. I've said it already in this video, so I'll say it again. He's a D-bag. That's exactly what he is. Listen to that. God encourages him to just give his best effort next time. Instead of doing that, he kills the guy who's doing better than him. He's an a-hole. All right. So Abel's dead. So he kills Abel out of pure jealousy, and this is already known by the Hebrews at the time when Moses was writing this, or whoever wrote Genesis. Maybe it was after Moses. We're moving on to verse 9 here. And then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother? I'm going to do King James here real quick. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and this is verse 8, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against his brother and slew him. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Again, what a tool. Like, he's just that guy that is such a tool. Listen to this. Every step of the way, he knows he did something wrong. It's like catching a grown up, not a kid, a grown up in a lie, and they've convinced themselves that they're in the right. Everyone else is out to get them, and the world's out to get them. God's out to get them. They're in the right when it's obvious to everyone that they've been in the wrong the whole time. So this is where the brother's keeper comes from. He's basically being a smartass here with God. Like, God knows what happened, and he's probably aware that God knows what happened, but he's playing like he's not. I mean, he's just being a smartass, a smart aleck, whatever you want to say. Side note, here's just a little side joke. My dad, he didn't get beat by my grandpa, but my grandpa definitely let him know he's in the wrong. One time they were sorting cattle or something, and my dad was being a smartass, and he was called that by my grandpa, and my dad said, well, would you rather me be a dumbass? Or something to that effect. And grandpa didn't like that comment. It's one of my dad's favorite stories, ironically. All right. So let's move on. Verse 10. And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hands. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. So that was verses 10 through 12. I'm not going to get into it because it's beyond me, but I do love reading articles on technology and science and engineering and stuff like that. And you guys got to look into this. There's frequency of blood. They can identify red blood cells and things like this. Our blood operates on a certain frequency. And it's just funny to me, and it could just be symbolism, who knows, but it's so ironic to me how much, like, the more we learn about science, it keeps lining up with stuff we learned in the Bible. So, yeah, verse 10, thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. Crieth unto me. He could hear it, he could feel it. Now, of course, he's God, so he knows all things, but I just find that interesting, the way that it's worded there. There's articles in the Nature Journal if you want to look it up. So, no longer will Cain be able to be a tiller of the ground. So now his offerings, if you would ever want to make them again, are definitely going to blow. So nice job there, man. You just shot yourself in the foot. What an idiot. All right, verse 13. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I am able to bear. Behold, wait a second. Yeah, I'm going to read that again. And Cain said unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. 14 now. Behold, thou hast driven me out of this land, out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. And the Lord said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on them sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. I like all the theories out there about what the mark of Cain is. Some of the more interesting ones and racially motivated ones are that he didn't have a beard, like he was beardless, and then that's why. I don't want to quote religions, but there might be a certain one in Utah that believes that that's why Native Americans are hairless. There's just so many interesting theories about it. Who cares what his mark was? It's such a futile thing, but I like listening to it. It's an interesting topic. So my big thing is right there in verse 14, though. People just ignore like it's no big deal. Let's back up a little bit. the way we're meant to understand this, again, who knows for sure, but is that Cain and Abel were the two eldest sons of Adam and Eve. Now, at this point of the murder, sure, Adam and Eve could have had more children, but how many more? Okay? We'll get into how old Adam was when he had Cain and Abel and stuff. Actually, I'm not sure if it says. I know it says he was like 120 when he had Seth later on, but I'm not sure if it says how. But anyway, 9 months to have a kid, you're not having like, even with as old as they're being, let's say he had Cain and Abel. This happens when Adam's 95, and they've been having kids steadily since they were 40. And they're having twins. Like, still, there's not that many people in the world yet. Okay? So what is that? 55 times 2 for the twins, which is still impossible, 9 months in the recovery time. But let's just, huge estimate here. So 55 times 2, there's 110 of your siblings, plus Abel, but you killed him. And then there's Adam and Eve themselves. So you got, 112 outside of yourself, people in the world. Yet, right here in verse 14, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that every one that findeth me shall slay me. Okay. Sorry, I'll be right back. Slay me. Who is going to slay him? Everyone wants to say it's his siblings. That's what every scholar and theologian says, it's his siblings. At most, he has, if they're having triplets, how many siblings does he have here? Okay? Again, the Bible doesn't even tell us at this point that he has any siblings other than Abel. I think he probably does, obviously. But, what? You're telling me that when God sends him away, who's he going to run into? His siblings are all still, according to all, there's so many non-canonical books that are referenced in the Bible, so we cannot necessarily, you don't want to take them 100% to heart, but you do want to be aware of what they say. And almost all of them line up with how Adam and Eve lived apart from what became the rest of the world, or what was the rest of the world, the other people, up on some sort of plateau or something like that. But even if that wasn't the case, they wouldn't have spread out that far yet. They'd still be living in a village setting if there was only 110, 100 some of them. Like, who are the other people that are going to kill him? That are going to punish him? His brothers and sisters are going to track him down? At this point, they're still listening to their father very much, their father being Adam. If other ones were wanting to live in sin, then they would have been referenced in their own stories. So at this point, most of Adam's children are still listening to Adam. Who knows? Maybe it was his siblings, but that's just to not even give credence to the other theories, to just say it's established that it was the siblings. Wow, come on, really? We'll get into it when we get to Genesis 6, but come on. All right, so yeah, who is he scared of and why? This leads credence again to the gap theory that there was a time between basically verses 1 and 2, and this is when the fall of Lucifer happened. I'm not going to get into it again on every video, but hopefully if anybody who's watching these, which I doubt very many people are, has seen any of them, they know I've mentioned the gap theory, and I've talked about it a bunch. But again, it's not important if you believe it. It's not important, but it's interesting to think about, and you have to wonder if it's true. And there's nothing blasphemous or, anti-Christian for wondering about the gap theory, because it still falls in line with everything in the Bible. And if it was still being debated at the time of Christ, if it was important, he would have addressed it. He didn't, therefore it's still an interesting topic for us to discuss. Alright, so siblings, maybe. Other beings, fallen angels, other entities, who knows? You know, maybe Adam and Eve and his family were still under the protection, and Cain was like, I'm not going to be under the protection anymore. Maybe they're unsanctioned beings. You know, God, through Christ, we discussed this. Christ was the Word. Christ was the one creating everything except for the light in the beginning when God said, let there be light. That's Christ. After he created the heavens and the earth, said, let there be light. And everything after that, the way it's worded is that God said, and basically his voice did the creating. And then at the end of each thing after he created it, God was like, saw that it was good, and basically gave his approval on what Christ created. So Christ was the one creating all this stuff, and God was giving his approval on all of it. You know, and God saw it and said it was good. After Christ, the voice, the Word, created it. And then his dad was like, yep, good job, son. So if you go credence to the gap theory, these fallen entities were creating their own things that were not okay by God. And this leads into, we're getting into it in just 2 chapters with the flood of Noah, but they're creating unsanctioned beings. And again, this is just a theory, but it's very interesting and makes sense. And it lines up with everything. So there's no reason to get mad when you hear it. Lots of people do, though. I don't understand why. Maybe it's too much for them to comprehend, but if it's too much for them to believe something that fantastical, then they're not reading the Bible and believing it. It's much more fantastical things we're going to get into. I tend to believe that. I really do. I mean, maybe it was his siblings. If it is, who cares? Like, that's probably doesn't change anything. But if it's fallen entities, it changes a lot. I think that's why people don't want to believe it, because then you really have to accept that there's evil in this world. You know, I don't buy into the Cain being the literal seed of the serpent. I think the seed of the serpent is something that you do when you decide to live in sin. Being the literal seed kind of takes away from the decisions that we have to make. It's like, oh, it's just a bloodline thing. So I don't buy into that. I think it's a decision you make to live in sin. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and ignore the fact that there's a lot of evidence for the gap theory. I know that entities that are fallen, that are evil, exist. It's in the Bible. Lucifer fell at some point. Cain scared of something. And Lucifer always wants to create the opposite of what God says is good. You know, Lucifer basically wants to be God, but he wants to be God in an upside down way. You know, everything is just the opposite. So it would make sense that he would have tried to create another being that doesn't have the divine spark, you know, and it's an unsanctioned creature. Who knows? Whatever. Probably just his siblings. But when you quickly want to ignore the fact that it could be other beings from the fallen ones, it's typically because it's too fantastical for you to believe. And if that's the case, then you really need to, again, I don't want to say, because it's not important to salvation, it really isn't, but you need to kind of deepen your metaphysical nature and understand that there are supernatural things. The Bible's full of it. They exist. Now we, as Christians, can have faith that we are protected, obviously, but to deny that they're real is, I don't know. It's not important for salvation, but it's not the smartest way to go about living. You know, you need to be aware of things. Again, that's not saying that's who he was afraid of. Could have been his siblings. But to just blatantly ignore the other theories out there, I don't know about that one. Besides, this gets into, when we get to the 10 Commandments here, how the commandment is not thou shalt not kill. It's thou shalt not murder, okay? So maybe it was his siblings, and maybe they would have seen this as justice, you know, eye for an eye. But who, you know, so that makes sense right there. But Cain committed murder, okay? That's what was evil about it. It wasn't, so killing wasn't the thing. It was that it was murder. He was doing it for, not for justice or for righteousness or anything like that, or for self-protection. It was straight up, he's jealous of his brother. So, Anyway, moving on. I've been stuck on this one way too long. Let's go on here. Verses 16 here. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, whoever that is, sister, I guess, again, right? And she conceived and bare Enoch. Now, we're going to get into another Enoch later. That's right, Cain has an Enoch, and then there's an Enoch by Adam's line through Seth. So, but Cain's firstborn is Enoch. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived an Enoch, and he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son, Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. So we'll stop there at Lamech. And so basically, right now, so he's kicked out of the presence of the Lord. He's cursed. He's given his mark. He has a wife. I mean, again, probably one of his sisters. I mean, maybe she left with him. I don't know why I wouldn't have said that, his wife left with him, because the Bible's very detailed like that. But again, this could be one of those things that was just assumed to be known by the Hebrews at the time, because this is written so many generations. This story had been told and told and told and told. After everyone knows the story, a lot of people just start leaving out details that it's like, yes, they know, we just need to give the gist of it. And that's what's going on in this early Genesis stuff, okay? Because remember, this is thousands of years after this happened. They're giving the recounted stories that they've been telling and keeping for centuries, and we're older writings. There are older writings that they had, and Moses was just basically recapping the stuff that everyone already knew. So there's legends, there's stories of who his wife might have been, but we don't know for sure because we have to base everything off of the Bible, because this is the stuff that we know. Everything needs to be referenced back to the canon of the Bible, okay? There's books that are mentioned in the Bible and referenced, and then I feel it's important that we read that you study those books, because it gives you a more understanding. But everything needs to come back to the words of the Scripture and referenced back, okay? Because there's some stuff that's been diluted, there's stuff that's been altered, there's stuff that's fake, and you really need to always come back to the way, because the reason the books are in the Bible is because they're the most we know, sort of thing. Alright, so he's kicked out of the presence. He's no longer connected to the Holy Spirit. So, like, the one undeniable sin of Christ says is the rejection of the Holy Spirit. I don't think he has that connection anymore, and that's part of his curse. So he knew his wife, had a son. His son is Enoch, yeah. So some people believe that the city of Tenochtitlan, where Mexico City is at, the Aztec capital, all these ancient civilizations, they said that an early civilization, most of the legends say a pre-flood civilization, created these structures. Now, this isn't me saying this. This is what their own legends, the Aztecs and the Mayans, their own legends are that an older civilization prior to a flood built this stuff. They didn't. You would think if you built it yourself, wouldn't you be bragging about how you built it? But no, they were giving credit to it. They just came up, this is where they built their civilization because it was already built there. And so some people think that the name goes back, it was Tenochtitlan. Who knows where this city is? Maybe it was ancient Atlantis. But I'm not trying to knock people. I'll probably get attacked for this. But there's many people who have exposed the Freemasons that they go back to the descendants of Cain, the secret knowledge of the Masons. Once you work your way up the ladder, is you keep getting revealed more and more. First it's, King Solomon in the temple, and then it's, Nimrod. He's the real first Mason who knew how to build. And then it goes back to Tubal-Cain, who we'll get into later as a further descendant of Cain, or Cain himself and Enoch, his son, because they built the first city. And who knows? Who knows if even that's what the Freemasons really believe? That's just what people who have gotten the secret writings of the Freemasons have released. All right. So let's move on here. Verse 19. And Lamech took unto him two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other was Zillah. And Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, I guess nomads, I don't know, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. Now, obviously, it's not like everyone who handles the harp and organ forever was that way. It's just he was probably the first one who started doing that and taught it to his sons, who taught it to their grandsons, and for a while they were the only ones who really knew how to do those sort of things. Lamech was the first to be a polygamist. Interesting. Now, of course, we have patriarchs of the Old Testament who end up having multiple wives, and we'll get into that when we do and the reasons by it. And I'm not trying to justify it or anything. I mean, no one was perfect but Christ, so even to put Moses or Abraham or any of them as perfect, you're missing the stroke there. But it's just interesting how Lamech is the first to take two. So there's a lot of, again, I always go into the out there theories. There's a lot of theories that the stuff that Cain's descendants started to do, like play the music and the harps and build cities and all this stuff, was shown to them by these fallen angels. You know, these are the pantheons of all the other great civilizations. You know, you ever notice how the Romans and the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Sumerians and the Mesopotamians and the Hittites and all these cultures seem to have the same sort of pantheon, even into Asia. And it's the same, like 6, 7 to 12, sometimes 14 gods that they all kind of worship. So Hebrew legend is that they are not gods. God is God. These pantheons, these false gods, are fake gods where people build idols to worship. And it's basically because these demons or these fallen angels, to me, are like spiritual internet trolls. That's the way I describe them. Because they're trolling God. You know, they're trying to get people to worship idols of wood and mud and stone as like a giving the finger to God, and it's how internet trolls work a lot of times. Like they will troll people into getting them to do ridiculous things while thinking they're doing something good. Like a very interesting troll that recently was a bunch of people on 4chan got feminist women to pee their pants for women. Like it was like a women's right thing, and it was all a joke. It was a troll. Internet trolls did this as a joke, and they fell for it. And that's what these demons do. They do spiritual internet trolling of everything that's good and holy in God's eyes. So, and like I said, I tend to believe that. I mean, I don't think that everything, like, I don't know if I believe all the legends that, you know, the harp and the flute and all this stuff were specifically taught by these angels. I think they might have shown these people how to play this harp and the lute in a way to seduce women and to use it for evil. That's not to say that playing the harp and the flute is evil in and of itself. They just showed them how to use all this stuff in an evil way. All right. Move. What? I didn't get that far, did I? Yeah. Okay, so Lamech has two wives and blah blah blah. Yeah, and his brother's name is Jubal. He was the father of all such who handle the harp and the organ. Verse 22 here. This is where I was getting it. Sorry. And Zillah, she bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives. So before we move on, what he said unto his wives, real quick here. Tubal-Cain. Now, I'm not going to get into detail about it, but this is a popular dude among Gnostics. And basically, Gnosticism is like the upside down of Christianity. Like, they will present themselves as Christians, and they're very similar to Christians, but it's like an upside down where we're all wrong, and Cain was the better bloodline, and Tubal-Cain was this great, wise guy. I'm not joking. This isn't me. Like, this is true. This is what people actually believe. And Tubal-Cain is like a patriarch of their version of things. Very interesting. And there's tons of text out there. Tons of them you can find about Tubal-Cain. I mean, of course, they're all legendary, just like most people in the world. And Christianity may be the biggest religion in the world, but most people in the world are not Christians. So most people think that the Bible itself is legend. So are these things about Tubal-Cain legend? Probably most of them, but certainly some truth, I'm sure. Verse 23, and Lamech said unto his wives, two of them, Ada and Zillah. Having two wives sounds like a hassle. Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. Ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Okay, the reason why this is in here, this seems very out of place if you don't know the extra canonical books, the stuff that the Hebrews, when this was written, would have already known. Also, the Hebrews of time of Christ would have also known. Because do you think that the only scriptures that Christ could memorized when he knew all the scriptures, even at the age of 12 in the temple, were just what we have in our Bible? No. There's other books referenced in our Bible, and Christ knew them. He knew them all, okay? And it's important for us to know them all too. Again, the ones we need to take firmly are the ones that are in the Bible. And even then, we need to find out the real translations of a lot of this stuff. But if it's referenced in the Bible, you should probably look at it. Now, if there's stuff in it that clashes with the Bible, then that's how you know that it's probably been corrupted over time and it's not as accurate. But there's most of them that are referenced in the Bible are pretty, like they line up so well. It's like they line up 80 to 95%, and the stuff that doesn't line up, it's like, oh, okay, clearly this was just, a lot of times it's like it's written by a person who's like devout in faith and they mean well. They just don't have all their facts, and it's not God inspired. It's written by a godly person, but not God inspired. Anyway, the reason why this is in here about Lamech is because Lamech is the one who kills Cain. The story goes, he's hunting, and he couldn't see well, and so right here it says, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech, hearken unto my speech, for I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. The story is, he couldn't see well, but he was bow hunting, and his grandson was with him, and Cain at this time is in the wilderness, and he's basically gone mad, living without the Holy Spirit for so many years. And Lamech couldn't quite tell what he was aiming at because he's partially blind, shoots him, kills him, and because his grandson didn't warn him who he was shooting when they find out who it is, he, in anger, kills his grandson. I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. Lamech killed Cain, and he is trying to save his own skin, in my opinion, because this doesn't say God said this. This is what Lamech is telling people. So Cain is the patriarch of this bloodline. I know I said I'm not big on bloodlines, but this is still time of villages and stuff. Cain was their patriarch, okay? It wasn't Seth on the other side. Their patriarch is Cain, and he just killed their patriarch. He's trying to say, and then out of anger, he kills his grandson also. Again, this can be found in the Book of Jasher, Book of Jubilee. I believe it's in, might be in Enoch also. Anyway, there's plenty of, we know that this is what it's saying. Lamech killed Cain, and I think he's trying to save his own skin. Truly, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. He's trying to get them to not kill him because, hey, if you kill me, you'll be even more cursed than the person who kills Cain. Don't hurt me. All right. 25 to 26, the last here. Man, I'm sorry, I know I do way too long on these. I just get into it, It's going to take me so long to do every chapter in the Bible. 25, verse 25, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bare a son, and called his name Seth. For God said, she hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to him also there was born a son, and he named his son Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So let's look at that real quick. To call upon the name of the Lord. J. To call themselves by the name of the Lord. Okay. Still not sure what that means totally. Like, that one just isn't. I get what it's saying here. It's just starting the bloodline of Seth, and then Enos is his son. Again, it hasn't said yet how many. It never really says how many children or what order they're all born. We don't know to Adam what the order is, really. We know Seth came after. Cain came before Abel, and Abel came before Seth. But kids between there, kids before there, kids between them, twins, triplets, we don't know any of that. Just other people were born to him. And they began to call upon the name of the Lord. I guess they just started to represent themselves as God's people. That's what I'm guessing it means. Cain had begun starting his bloodline, and Seth was now, they started to call themselves the men of God. I mean, that's the best I can do of it. I mean, I've looked into it. Don't get me wrong. I do some research before I do these videos, but none of it really makes too much sense or is too verifiable, and none of the theories are interesting enough. I just think it means that they started to call themselves upon by like men of God, men of Yahweh or whatever.